So welcome again. Thank you all for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you to our first virtual career networking event. My name is Hiba Abbasi, and on behalf of the University of Manchester Middle East Center team, I would like to welcome you all and thank you for taking the time to join us today. For those who don't know us, I would like to start by briefly introducing the University of Manchester, which is the largest campus-based university in the UK with strategic partnerships and collaborations worldwide. For more than 25 years, the university has been providing transnational education and forging global partnerships and centers of learning across 4 continents. In 2006, Alliance Manchester Business School, which is part of the University of Manchester, was launched in the Middle East Center by its founding director, Randab Sesu, to offer the part-time global MBA program for working professionals. And since 2017, we have operated as the University of Manchester Middle East Center, representing and supporting the activities of the entire university in the region. We have also expanded our offerings to include, in addition to the MBA program, other specialist master's programs such as the MSc in Real Estate and Educational Leadership in Practice. And we also have other master's programs coming up really very soon. Today, the University of Manchester Middle East Center supports more than 2,800 students, and we have graduated 1,700 students. All our students are working professionals, and they come from 100 nationalities. We have also developed a regional alumni community of approximately 4,500 graduates of the university. We have global centers. Dubai is one of them, but we also have Singapore, Shanghai, Sao Paulo, Hong Kong, in addition to Manchester. Today's event, the Virtual Career Networking event, is really one of the highlights of the career events for this year because it brings together corporates and industry experts who will share with us information about the current job market, about employment and recruitment, and about the top skills that are sought after by employers. The event will start by the panel discussion on the topics that I've just mentioned, and then it will be followed by networking with corporates in corporate-specific breakout rooms. Here you will get a chance to visit the breakout rooms and to visit the corporate representatives to learn more about the company, to learn more about their industry, to understand their hiring and recruitment trends, and to learn more about what they look for in candidates. Here, I would like to take a moment to thank all the corporate partners who have taken the time to join us today. So special thanks to each and every one of them. I would also like to especially thank the corporate representatives who have joined us today. So special thanks to Ahmed Al-Khameri, Emiratization Support Manager at Abu Dhabi Ports, Tim Shelton, Digital Transformation and Innovation Lead at Arcadis, Salwa Labban, HR Manager at AstraZeneca, Rami Bayour, Regional Director, Middle East at CIPD, Ghassan Youssef, Graduate Program Manager at Citi, Mu'taz Hassan, Head of Operations at Continental, Cecile Romano, HR Professional at DTP, Lama Jubara, HR Director at GE Gas Power, Hamda Al-Najjar, Talent Acquisition Specialist at GM, and Andre Stefan Lewis, Recruiter HR at GSMA, Lynn Sherry, Account Director, Talent Solutions at LinkedIn, James Tucker, Talent Acquisition Leader at Nissan Motor Corp, Ritika Agarwal, HR and Admin Manager at North Telecom, Lexi Woodwork, HR Business Partner at Omnicom Media Group, Halim Mazzouz, Partner and Managing Director at Red. And I would like to welcome SAP team, HR Senior Recruitment Consultants, Joanne Kruger, Lawrence Sampson, and Abdulrahman Kazar. And last but not least, I would like to welcome from Sira, Hershey Rivera, Talent Acquisition Specialist, and Renzi Varghese, HR Head of Culture and Engagement. And now it's time to start our panel discussion. So I would like to invite and welcome our guest speakers. So special thanks to each and every one of you. And I would like to introduce Lama Jubara, who's the HR Director at GE Gas Power. James Tucker, Talent Acquisition Leader at Nissan Motor Corp. Rashid Alhassani, Commercial Director, Maqta Gateway at Abu Dhabi Ports. And our alumni, Tim Shelton, Digital Transformation and Innovation Lead at Arcadis Middle East. And last but not least, also our alumni, Rami Bayour, Regional Director at CIPD, and he's also the moderator for today's session. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest speakers. And now I'll pass it on to you, Rami. But before I do that, can I ask you all to switch off your cameras and mute yourself just in case to eliminate noise. But during the session, Rami will be taking questions. So if you have a question that you would like to ask one of the panelists, you can type it in the chat box, but you can also unmute yourself and ask it to the panel, to the guest speaker that you wish to ask the question. And now I'll pass it on to you, Rami.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And thanks very much for the opportunity, Hiban, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. If you're in Dubai, good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are in the world. Thank you very much for joining us, for spending the next at least 1 hour during the panel discussion that I have the privilege and the pleasure of moderating. Like Hiba said, my name is Rami Bayour. I'm a proud alumni of Manchester Business School in the Middle East. I think it took me about 3 years or about 3.5 years to finish, but that was probably the biggest milestone in my life. So and now when I reflect on it, I only remember the good things, but I think during the time we all forget about all the hard work that we all had to go through, and definitely all the sleepless nights that we had to do during the workshops. I look after the regional office for CIPD, which is the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. For some of you who know us, you know what we do, but for those of you who don't know what we do, we are the professional body for people managers and HR people across the globe. We have over 155,000 professional members based all over the world, and we're over 100-year-old organization. What we do essentially is that we provide research and guidance, as well as consulting and professional education to the HR and L&D community. So probably for the past 4 years, all I did day in and out is really talk to people about HR and how we can take our people practices forward. And what I will bring to the panel discussion today is probably some of the sort of key insights that we're all seeing across the globe. And for the past probably 6 to 7 months, we at the CIPD have also been working really hard with different stakeholders in the people profession to try and obviously respond to what's happening, but at the same time try and predict what is going to happen, which obviously is a very difficult thing to do when things keep changing, but it really has enabled us to be able to provide some guidance to our employers and members across the world. The panel today will talk about careers. Obviously, it's a very big topic. It will talk about careers in the pandemic, which obviously is also going to be quite an interesting and challenging topic to approach. But I also will talk about careers in the recovery. So I think one thing just kind of clearly have from sort of the outset here is that we will see recovery. So everyone is already talking about recovery. I was in an economist briefing, an economic briefing, not economist, because it wasn't actually done by the Economist. Recently, which was last week, and it really focused on the UAE outlook for economy. And we're already seeing really good signs for that recovery. Obviously, that doesn't mean that it's not going to be a tough road ahead for that recovery. And I think the timelines and the timescales might be slightly different depending on when a vaccine will be developed and will come to market or will come online, especially to our market, as well as some other external factors. But I think there has been some recognition and probably some common consensus that we might see some local lockdowns. So you might potentially see lockdowns popping up in different parts of the world, so whether it's Europe, US, Asia, or certainly in the Middle East. But one thing we're probably certain of is that we're not going to see a lockdown happen across the global economies at the same time, which obviously is what happened in March and following that, which obviously has led to that economic stop and and the subsequent economic slowdown. So these are all really good signs, really good things to see happening. Another thing to keep in mind as well as we kind of go through this is that no one yet has really been able to put an exhaustive list of what the long-term impact of the pandemic will have on the economies, and most certainly how that will, of the long-term impact it will also have on the way we work and the way that work is organized. I think one thing we're all certain of as well is that there is going to be a new normal, and going back to the old normal is probably not going to be possible. And I would encourage the thoughts here as well is that, is it really worth going back to the old normal? I think all of us have experienced firsthand what it feels like to work remotely, what it feels like to be working in a very uncertain landscape. And therefore, is it really worth us going back to normal when things didn't necessarily have the right outcomes? We've seen acceleration in technology advancement and digital working. I think none of us could predict that in some cases you could have a doctor's appointment done completely over Zoom, government services being completely delivered online and over Zoom. What would have probably taken about 10 years in terms of progress happened pretty much within a few months. And that is a great thing to see, obviously, because what would that mean is that all of a sudden we have unlocked many different frontiers for how we do work. So without taking a lot of the time, I wanted to kind of just really set the scene, give you an idea of where we are. None of this stuff, obviously, you've heard is new to you. You've all experienced it. You've all heard it from other people. But I just wanted to bring it in terms of the context. So I have a really we have a really great panelists with us today, a really good balance as well between HR people, so people that are in the HR industry, that are working with people practices, as well as recruitment, obviously, as well as people that are in the business, so people that are in the commercial side, people that are seeing things kind of play out from that front as well. So we will have a balanced level of insights coming in from both sides. So if I were to hand over to one of my panelists, or to my panelists, what I'd like you to do, please, if you could just introduce yourself to the audience. If you can give us just a very quick introduction of who you are, but also the industry that you're representing. And maybe in 1 minute, if you could tell us what is probably the biggest impact COVID and the pandemic has had on your industry specifically. So can I start with Lama, ladies first?
Yeah, thanks, Rami, and hi everyone. My name is Lama Ajbara. I'm the HR director for GE Gas Power, based out of Dubai. It's great to join you today and my esteemed panelists on this amazing event. So thanks again for having me. I think having been in the energy industry for almost 15 years, whether in GE or in my prior years as well in the consulting field, I think obviously what we're going through in terms of pandemic, I would consider it as an amazing learning opportunity. It's definitely something that we're witnessing. So from that perspective, I see we're so lucky and fortunate to experience that. And it's gonna really put a lot of question mark around some of the practices that we used to have. You called it, Rami, the old normal, right? So it's a great opportunity for us to take a step back and reflect and say, whether from HR practices, whether from business practices, what are the opportunities for us to do things differently? So really answering the question, what are the things we need to do more of? and the things we need to do less of to really continue to be competitive in the marketplace. When I look at it, for us in GE Gas Power, given that we work in the energy business closely with Ministry of Electricity, Ministry of Oil, obviously we've seen, we continue to obviously the government and the countries we operate in, we continue to see the need for the energy, especially in this part of the world, whereby this continues to see a growth market. There are different challenges around the industry cycle with the growth of the renewable business. However, we see with some of the oil price and the decline in some of the budgets in the government, it was really a big moment for us to think creatively in terms of how do we continue partnering with these governments. And it's just amazing to see the amount of creativity that can come out of a certain, I would say, challenge. And this is where I see that as a big opportunity. I'm happy to talk more about it as we answer the questions you have.
Great, thank you very much, Lama. No, that was really good. That was a really good overview. Can I ask then Tim, please, to introduce himself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tim Shelton. I lead digital transformation and innovation for Arcadis. We are a design, engineering, and management consulting firm. We predominantly operate within the built environment sectors, so construction, design, architecture, offering full end-to-end services and integrated solutions for our clients. I think, to kind of mirror Lama's point, I think what's happened is actually presented a massive opportunity for us as an industry which is typically kind of lagged behind a lot of other sectors in terms of how we adopt and how we're able to implement technologies in a value-driven way. We have been forced down this road where it started with virtual working, but now we're actually trying to piece together different technology and propositions that can really drive value through our industry. In terms of the immediate or the obvious impact that COVID has had on construction in particular, obviously a lot of construction sites are closed for a period of weeks, some into 2 or 3 months, and obviously activity just ground to a halt. Construction is one of those sectors that you can't do virtually. It's very difficult to immediately implement some technological and digital solutions to actually drive progress. And what it's also done is kind of it's made us look as an industry at revalidating and reprioritizing certain major projects and programs within the region. So in Saudi in particular, I think we're all aware of the massive transformation program that Saudi is going under at the moment. There's a recalibration of some of those programs, reprioritization. It enables us as an industry to go in and use new digital tools and techniques to actually look at how we can optimize those projects and programs, which is quite exciting. And I think, more so for the purposes of this particular webinar, it's really shone a light on the sort of skills that we're going to need, not just now, but also in the future as well. So really kind of focus in on the workforce of the future, which is an area of, that I find particularly fascinating. My role is to not only transform our own business internally to drive more, to drive optimization, to drive efficiency, but also piece together technologically powered value propositions to drive us into the future. And that is going to mean a fundamental shift and pivot of skill sets as we move forward, which I'll come on to more in the presentation. But pleased to be here. Thank you for the invite. And I'm keen to talk about the opportunities that this time provides for us later in the webinar.
Great, thank you very much, Tim. And I think the area around skill set will be really key to the discussion, which we'll touch upon later on. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts, especially from a digital point of view as well. Great. Moving on to James, please.
Hi, Rami. Hi, everyone. So my name is James Tucker. I'm the talent acquisition leader for the Africa, Middle East and India region of Nissan. I've been with Nissan for the last 2 years. So what impact has it had on ours? A huge impact on the industry. Both the manufacturing plants and dealerships all shut down. So if you're not making or selling cars, then it does have a significant impact on the P&L of an automotive organization, and that's globally as well. So I think, though, I would say there are some green shoots for the industry as a whole. So there's one belief that as people start to move about again, that perhaps that they will look to purchase vehicles rather than go on public transport where they're interacting with lots of other people. So there could be an opportunity there for the automotive industry to get those first-time owners or people moving out of commuting on public transport. And aligned to what a lot of other people have talked about, it's forced a shift, I suppose, in the way that we sell vehicles as well. So the sector can be quite traditional, sell through car dealerships where people go and visit them and sit down and do finance in the showrooms. And it's quite a traditional, old-fashioned approach to selling a product or a service. And so certainly over the period of lockdown, I think, and we weren't alone at Nissan, but it really pushed us to move into the digital space far quicker, where we have virtual showrooms where people can go online and buy the cars online without actually having to physically visit the showroom. Most people these days have all of the research at their fingertips anyway about what car they want to buy anyway. So when they come into a showroom, they generally have a good idea which model it is. It might just be the final trim or colour that they change their mind on. And we know that with generation, Y and Z, they're going to expect this anyway. So it's just really pushed the investment here. And that's where we're going to see the drive in skills and the shift in terms of the type of person we will be looking to hire in the future.
Great, thank you very much, James. And I think I would really be keen to know a little bit more about the skills that were put behind that move to digital as well. If you're selling a car, getting your salespeople to be able to then support a digital process obviously will require quite a lot of training and upskilling.
Yes.
Right, so last but not least, Rashid, Abu Dhabi Ports. It would be great to hear from you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rashid Alhassani. I'm the Commercial Director at Maqta Gateway. We are a subsidiary of Abu Dhabi Ports, and we look after all matters related to digitalization. We are, in essence, a trade facilitation company. So we look at how we can ease the movement of goods, making it faster, cheaper, and more transparent. So obviously, we play a big role as compared to other entities and industries when it comes to the COVID-19 situation. Obviously, the movement of goods cannot stop even in emergencies. And in fact, it's more important that you facilitate that movement. So you're talking about critical things such as food, supplies, medicine, everything you can think of that's needed during a crisis. So it's up to us to make sure that there's no disruption in the movement of goods, and that we make sure that we've streamlined and improved all the processes related to the import-export process. So that's essentially at the heart of what we do. It has been very challenging times. It's not all smooth sailing, but it's been a testament to us on how important that digital technologies are. We started one of our biggest projects, which is the Advanced Trade Logistics Platform, which is mandated by the government of Abu Dhabi to be the single window for import and export trade and logistics services. So we did that all online. We're talking about hundreds of meetings with more than 40 stakeholders from the private sector, government local, government federal, getting all those requirements down, getting sign off on the scopes of work. It's massive work to be done during a crisis, but thankfully we've always been ready for such situations, and we managed to quickly transition from being physically at the office to 100% online with all the tools ready and set up for the team. So, and being a digital company ourselves, it's easier for us to adapt to digital way of work.
Indeed. Great. Well, thank you so much, Rashid. Just before I move on to the next part of the panel, can I just please remind you, if you've just joined us, because I'm conscious that some people may have just joined, if you could, if you have any questions throughout the panel, please type them in the chat and we'll pick them up at certain points throughout the panel. If you want to specify certain questions also one of our panelists, please do so in the chat function. If you're not a panelist as well, if I may just ask you to make sure that you mute yourself, as well as stop your video from being broadcast, to stop to make sure that we just focus obviously on the panelists for this part of of the event. So I think one of the key areas that I'm pretty sure everyone in the panel, in the event today, all of the attendees, people that are watching, would really like to know of is that they want to see when are we expecting a recovery. Like I said at the opening of the panel, we're talking about recovery in different parts of the region, but also in different parts of the economies themselves. So certain industries are expected to recover faster than other industries. So when you look at things like financial services and healthcare and pharma, these industries are obviously expected to recover faster than, say, industries like retail and travel and tourism. So I'm really keen to hear from the panel around sort of prediction for economic recovery in their own specific industry, because we have a really wide, varied industries here, from automotive, construction to power and gases, obviously, as well as shipping and ports and logistics. So again, just very briefly, if anyone wants to start, we're talking about when are you expected to kind of go back to recovery, if any, because some industries haven't even had any slowdown.
Do you want me to jump in there, Rami?
Yeah, please, yes, whoever.
So, yeah, I mean, construction predominantly usually is one of the first industries to be hit, right? It's a very cash-driven industry. And when you go into a downturn, it's about preserving cash, ultimately. So, you know, we were, unfortunately, one of the first industries to be hit, as I alluded to earlier. You know, our pipeline was significantly impacted due to some projects being shelved, construction being slowed right down. But actually, as we begin to come through this and we begin to emerge into the new norm, so to speak, one of the ways that an economy can recover is by really investing in national infrastructure, in projects such as those being led by Rashid, ports, expansions, things like that, really just kind of triggers to get the economy going. So we're actually seeing that actually our infrastructure business is beginning to become quite active. We're seeing a lot of bidding activity. We've secured a couple of major wins recently. And again, to go back to the Saudi part of the region, their major transformation program at a national level is going ahead unabated. All it did was just act as a bit of a shock to the system and recalibration of those major programs. So we're actually seeing a lot of activity now, a lot of activations and continuation of those major programs within Saudi Arabia. They want to do things differently. A lot of them are acting as blank canvases. They're not poisoned, so to speak, by legacy processes and governance. So we can really go in there and set these programs up for success. And we can go in there and look through those programs through the lens of a digitally enabled program and bring those new skill sets onto those programs. I think the other thing that we're seeing in the industry is that actually in more mature economies like the UAE, instead of focusing on major capital programs, bringing new built assets into the economy, major clients are now looking at how they optimize their current asset portfolios. So actually, how do you reduce the operating costs if you're an asset owner in the region? And again, that's actually bringing new technologies to the fore in terms of how we do that. How do we bring in the likes of a digital twin proposition to actually look at modeling different data sets, to look at different scenarios around a facilities management strategy, to really squeeze the operating margin as best we can of those assets. So, kind of in summary, from a kind of broad level perspective, we're actually being quite, we're seeing a lot of positive moves in the industry, albeit, it is separated between major program management, capital delivery in Saudi, and a shift towards asset management within more mature economies like the UAE.
Great. No, thanks, Tim. Anyone else wants to maybe add a different perspective to that? Just again, looking at your industry, I'm sure we're all involved in business planning and looking at years ahead. Sort of what is your kind of prediction? And again, at this point, it's just prediction about when recovery and how long it will take for your industry to recover.
Yeah, I can give a bit of an overview to automotive. So I think automotive was struggling or having a globally challenged sector as it was prior to COVID hitting as well. So it was a bit of a double whammy for the industry. I think in this region, actually, we at Nissan are always considered a sort of high growth market as well. We're lucky to have the Nissan Patrol, which is our flagship car for the UAE. And we have a strong sort of position here. I think it's where the industry may struggle is in some of those more mature markets like North America and West Europe as well, where they were already struggling for the total inventory that was being sold as a sector as well, and a fairly saturated marketplace as well. So and where you would anticipate perhaps if the industries take longer to recover there as a whole, you'd anticipate more redundancies. And I think at this time when there's uncertainty, are people going to go out and make that big purchase item of buying a new vehicle, getting committed to finance and potential debt. So I think in this region, I think we're a little bit more fortunate, and we're already seeing, certainly from what I'm hearing, is that the figures are already outperforming the sort of revised forecast that we had planned for our region here as well. So I think the team are doing particularly well, but so we are seeing, let's say, there's green shoots here within the sort of Africa, Middle East and India region, and we've got a number of key new product launches as well that we're still, that we haven't delayed the product launches. If anything, we're pushing ahead with those because that will help drive, future sort of interest in sales as well.
It's really good to hear, James. So I'm guessing the digital showrooms actually ended up doing the job. So that's really good to hear.
Must be, yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Rashid or Lama, does any one of you want to add into any of that?
Yes, I mean, from our side, yes, we saw a decline in certain areas and certain focus points. But again, as a door closes, another opens. And we saw a massive opportunity to be a strategic partner for the government to facilitate the movement of the goods that are in demand at the current crisis. So anything related to medicine and food supplies, whether it's technology or improving the process, just making sure that those supplies come in easier and faster to meet the demands, has been a great opportunity of growth for us. And in fact, it's created jobs, and it's a whole different area on its own now. So I think there's always an upside to these kind of challenging circumstances and times. And as what happened, I would say with the typewriters during IBM's time, as they became irrelevant, a computer industry was born. So I think this crisis has given birth to a lot of new industries that are more focused on digital transformation, AI, machine learning, these kind of areas now, just to meet the demands of difficult times. So you'd see a lot of new applications have gained importance. A lot of new technologies have become more relevant. So it's shifted our focus, in fact, to look for opportunities in these kind of areas. And that's how you offset the challenges of a declining or slowing industry. So, I mean, change is inevitable, Rami. And it's adapting to that change and being flexible and agile. That's what gets you out of the crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think agile is probably the key word for the past 6 months. And I think another key word was pivot. We've seen quite a few industries really pivot during the lockdowns. We've seen delivery companies that used to deliver food moved into delivery groceries and pharmaceuticals. We've seen industries that used to operate in a sphere completely change their business model to fit into the new economic landscape. Lama, I have instead of answering that question, I have a slightly different question for you, because obviously you come from an HR background, and one of the key things that we also were keen to understand is, obviously, we all know that during the downturn, that will have impact on jobs, that will have impact on careers. Companies either made redundancies or froze hiring. And I think, you know, in the least is that we've seen quite a few businesses stop hiring. And we have, however, seen businesses actually continue to hire even throughout the lockdown. We've heard of businesses like FMCG where they're actually putting more people in because they were frontline workers. How is the new world of talent acquisition, let's say, or recruitment is going to look like? How are businesses, whether in the region or globally, are going to start to look at recruitment and approach recruitment? Especially, and I'm really keen to hear your thought on that, because you obviously look after a wider region, especially now that you can almost work from anywhere. You don't really need to be in one place or another. So do we all have to have 100 people working in Dubai, or can we have maybe key positions in Dubai and maybe some spread out across the region where the markets require them? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so Romeo, the way we see it, especially in the energy business or in gas power in particular, I think it's a big change in terms of what is our employee value proposition. So how do we look at EVP and what are we trying to offer for our talents or for the newcomers joining the company? I think given the pandemic, given the cycle of the business, we see a big change in terms of how do we look at our cost structure. So to your point is that if we continue to invest, governments would continue to need electricity. This is an area in the infrastructure that would continue to grow, especially in emerging markets like Iraq, Saudi, Algeria, and others, Libya, for example, in our region. So we see more move from a high cost to a low cost. So the whole concept of a headquarter, I think it's really, I would say, vanishing with time. So, and then the virtual world that we're in today doesn't really, we had shown that we were able not to work in an office space, right? So being able to continue operate, our field engineers have been going on sites, all the operations have been managed virtually, obviously for those able to work virtually. So we have proven that we do not need that office space. So why do you need a headquarter structure, for example? Why do you need to have everybody be based in Dubai, whereby you need to be closer to the customer? So that big shift to be able to manage the cost structure from high cost to low cost, being closer to the customer, is a number one element that we're looking at it. From an EVP, I just wanted to add one thing in terms of the cycle has changed, the priorities has changed, EVP needs to be relooked at. Today, when we look at talents, when we look at even our employees, is that, do you want to be part of that reimagining the business? And I think this is the traits and the skills you look for in talent, whether internally or externally, that they want to come and really look at being part of changing this new cycle or being part of this reimagining the energy business in the region. So if talents used to join a company for a leadership program or for being part of a big name, today we're telling them, come join us and be part of remaking this business. And that's a different way of looking at it, right? From a talent acquisition and from an overall EVP. Obviously, the cost structure and benefit structure is very important to sustain and remain competitive in the market. But I think the type of traits and skills required are very, very different today.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, a great opportunity and it's fascinating.
100% agree. And I think there is quite a bit of, I mean, any responsible business would start to look at their cost structures. And we all know people, for most industries, people represent the biggest cost structure. So how can you ensure that your cost structures are solid, but at the same time meeting those customer demands? And I'll give you an example. We've heard of organizations where they shut down their offices. They moved into working from anywhere program. So it's not home working, it's not remote working, it's work from anywhere program. And by allowing people to work from different parts of the world, because most of the work that they do is purely digital, what they've managed to do is they've actually managed to reduce salaries by a very big portion. But that didn't actually impact the lifestyle and the value for their people, because people moved into markets which are, in some cases, their own home countries, where they actually have a much lower cost of living. So instead of spending a certain huge amount on things like rent and infrastructure in places in high cost places like, let's say, Dubai or Abu Dhabi, they've moved into other markets, say in Cairo or Beirut, where they actually still manage to keep a like-for-like salary, but actually the cost overall to the business has really improved. And I think that is something that we are seeing happen across the globe. We are actually seeing companies and businesses saying, when they were resistant in the past to the idea of remote working and the idea of flexible working, now they've actually seen it proven to be working, which is something that the CIPD has been talking about for 10 years. And now they're obviously saying, okay, well, that's great, let's take advantage of that and see how that works. So it'll be really interesting to see how that actually impacts the Middle East as well, especially Dubai being a very high cost base for both living and for setting businesses. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic changes. James, I want to go back to you to talk a little bit more about the actual recruitment process. So, how has that changed now? So we've got, people might not be able to come to interviews anymore because of social distancing. It'd be interesting to see how people can actually do interviews with their masks on. But aside from that, how has that impacted the way companies recruit?
Yeah, so I think virtual recruitment has been around for a while, and that has been ongoing. Especially in this region where you sometimes are part of a larger region, so there's validation from outside of countries, so you'll often have to set that up just for time and availability, and you're not going to fly people all around the world to do those interviews. However, there was always ordinarily at least one face-to-face meeting with an individual before a hire decision was made. That was always a mandatory part of the process. So the candidate could come into an office and at least experience, the work environment and a bit of a feel for the company, and we could meet them. I think where we've shifted it to now is that people are far more comfortable making hire decisions without even physically meeting the person face to face. So, and those interviews will happen. And that's not just for external hiring as well. We're looking at our own internal talent management succession planning sessions, and when we're doing our assessments of future managing directors, whereas before they would be flown to Japan and have a formal meeting, we're now, the plan is to do that all virtually as well. However, I still think that, things do normalise, and as they are, we're still seeing it now where we are able to meet people face to face, and it's within country. We've got a graduate programme that we run for fresh graduates each year. And we've recently had that, and it involves things like case studies and group tasks and things which are a little bit harder to manage over, Zoom technology, where you want a group of students to work together. There's still that element of doing it face to face as well, but obviously following the relevant, legal and health restrictions that we have in place within our locations as well. But I think that will continue. Because the industry was moving that way already. It's probably just like everything else, it's given it that extra push to do that, and people are becoming far more confident with it as well. This is a candidate experience as well. Lots of candidates historically don't like to do virtual interviews because it's hard to build rapport than if you're meeting somebody face to face. So again, I think the more people are using this as part of day-to-day life, they become more relaxed and expect it now.
What about the onboarding process, James?
Yeah,
because that's obviously
yeah, that's even harder. That's even harder. So I think you're virtually onboarding people, and it's all well and good, getting them set up with laptops and getting them, sent to their homes and trying to set them up. But if they're working remotely, that is really difficult because, people rely on those, what it's like when you start a new job. It's like being at the first day at school. You just don't know how to navigate anything or to find the simple things and ask the silly questions. So, usually you'd start, sit and ask the person sat next to you to help find something on the intranet, whereas it's a bit harder to do that virtually. In most of our locations, though, we are now moving back to, occupancy as well. So it's getting easier to do that. But we did have a period of time where we did start new people and we had to go through that slightly more painful process. But I think both sides are appreciative of the situation and the circumstances and are quite patient with it as well. But yeah, that was challenging.
Absolutely. I think can't remember the name of the business. I lost the name. But it's predominantly a global business that's always has people all across the world, and they had a really good onboarding program for their virtual workers or their remote workers, and it it really was, I think it won some great awards, but and it was designed, I think, about 7 or 8 years ago, and it was now being shared all of a sudden all across. I think I saw it on LinkedIn a few times. I'm sorry, I completely forgot the name. I think I'm drawing a blank. Great. Well, thank you so much for that, James. I want to go back. I want to go to now Rashid and ask a question around, because we talked about how that's impacted recruitment and the way we recruit people. But I think also the key thing that probably all of us want to walk away learning a little bit more about and preparing for, I guess, is what are the skills that you're looking for now? What do you think probably will be the key skills that employers will start to demand and ask, candidates and job seekers for?
Well, Rami, the landscape has changed dramatically. I mean, and it's been happening gradually, so it's not all sudden because of Corona. I think a lot of the education institutions are more geared for the industrial era. They're teaching very traditional, process-oriented, waterfall kind of mentality, and very traditional disciplines and curriculums that don't necessarily match the job market's needs today. So for us, for example, we're not only looking for people with basic IT skills or software engineering or development skills. We're looking at people who can solve problems, people who can understand customer journeys, people who can understand how to advocate for adoption of technology. So it all happens early on, even from the design to mapping out the processes and being very intelligent in the way you create a smart solution that will have a high adoption and success. So something you can notice even here in the region, there was this massive shift towards digital transformation. And a lot of entities struggled with this because all they cared about was meeting a timeline or a deadline. So they managed to move bad processes from manual to digital, which doesn't solve the problem. Other entities did a very quick job in developing a standard web page, and some of it is not user friendly. Some of it, was complete failure. So I think evolving in our approach and looking at things such as machine learning, AI, smart solutions, and focusing on the customer journey. These kind of themes need to be embedded in the curriculums that are being taught, and candidates need to be seeking certifications or education in such areas and fields. Otherwise, you have a fancy degree or a fancy CV, but you cannot cope with the ever-changing requirements of the job market. And certainly those who stick to job descriptions will never survive in this day and age. So you need to be flexible, you need to be agile, you need to be in tune with the trends, the trajectory of where we're going. Certainly a lot of social scientists and historians are advocating that the blue-collar job market and industry is in danger, and a lot of these very repetitive and routine jobs are going to be wiped out. Some of them, as important as even in the medical field. So some scientists are saying that even doctors will no longer be relevant in the presence of biotechnology and artificial intelligence and robotics. So, I mean, anything that doesn't require critical thinking, problem solving, emotional intelligence, human interaction, these kind of things will be wiped out. Whether it's going to happen in 10 years or 20 years, we're certainly headed towards that.
No, that's brilliant. That's actually really, everything you said, Rashid, is pretty much in line with everything that we're hearing. Even before COVID, even before the pandemic started, we did a very big report to talk about machine learning, to talk about robotics and automation and their threat to jobs. Because the CIP obviously looks after that side of things, and we did say obviously there is a threat. A big thing about robotics and automation and AI is that they already exist, they're already here. A lot of the stuff that is happening behind the scene is already done by that, so it's not something new, it's not something that's been happening all of a sudden, but definitely COVID accelerated the move to that, and also gave a lot of businesses that were just about on the edge, who weren't yet believed or who weren't yet invested in doing or moving towards automation and robotics, and now a reason to do that. So I think again the acceleration overall is going to happen really, really quickly. And for people that are working, and that's another thing that the CIPD advocates for, is that we believe that the future of work is human. So yes, robotics will do that, AI will exist, but it is the responsibility of us as business leaders and HR leaders is to ensure that there is a human element to that. And a very big example of that is the skills we talked about, whether it's agility, whether it's emotional intelligence, as well as obviously other things like the human design and design thinking and all of that. And the way we see that happening, and the only way it would actually will happen for the benefit of the entire economy, is that if we take that with a blended approach. So it is human and machine working together to produce effectively and efficiently. Things like blue collar workers, like you said, are going to be the unfulfilling work. There's, no one wants to be sitting, on an assembly line. It's just not meaningful for anyone to do. So that stuff can be done by robotics. And if anyone is interested as well, there is something in The Guardian that was, I think, last week or the week before, I'm not sure. And it was an article that was written completely by a robot. So it's a robot journalist. And it's an opinion piece, which is really interesting. And I think the headline was like, this entire article is written by a robot. Are you afraid now? So I would really encourage you to read it because it's quite interesting. I want to ask you, Tim, because your job is a digital transformation lead. What are you, if you were to hire someone, what would be the skills that you would you would be looking for? And then I'll move on to Lama to ask you that from an HR point of view.
Yeah, thank you, Rami. I think firstly, I think Rashid absolutely nailed that answer. Actually, agree entirely with everything you're saying there. I think what we're seeing actually is we're seeing that actually there needs to be kind of a hybrid approach to skills acquisition right now in this kind of interim period, where you need a mix of very tactical skills, which are becoming more prevalent in the industry. So things like data analytics, systems integration, solution architects, technology strategists, those are the kind of more tactical type skill sets that we're beginning to routinely look for and our clients are looking for. But I think more important actually is the softer side of things, which strikes more at the kind of strategic level. And those are ultimately around business change management. It's the enablers. These people are going to be the enablers of transformation moving forward. Now, what technology is doing, and what technologies are now more accessible than they ever have been, and they continue to be so. But what that does is it actually creates a world of complexity. So technology is an investment. So every time that you look to automate a process, you have to look at it as a kind of business case. You have to look at actually what process am I actually beginning to automate here. And Rashid made the point of a lot of people were very they rushed into implementing a technology without actually properly thinking it through, and sometimes even implementing technology on top of a bad process, which just accentuates the problem, right? And it slows down your transformation. What you actually need is those skill sets with the creativity, with the emotional intelligence, with the foresight to actually piece together different technologies in a way that unlocks value in a completely different way and accelerates the transformation of that business. I think Lama mentioned it earlier about reimagining business models, and that is exactly what we're trying to do here. It's a skill at actually looking at a process and looking at actually how you optimize that process before bringing the technology in. And what we're also looking for in people is just to be savvy about what's out there. We don't necessarily want a deep domain expertise within that technology, but we want an awareness of how, as I said, you can piece these things together in a very compelling way. Now that means that you might look outside of the business to a new startup. It's leveraging new ecosystem partners, which you have to look at new ways of partnering with businesses. Making sure that your vision is aligned with their vision. Do you have the cultural fit? there's a lot of strategic type of decisions that need to be made if you're going to implement technologies in a way that, as I said, adds value to that business. And I think hopefully that gives the audience on this call a fair amount of confidence, because that's exactly what the MBA is trying to teach them, right? It's not about those deep domain skills that that traditionally were the kind of skills that would set you up for a career of, say, 30, 40, 50 years even. It's the softer side of things which enable you to pivot, to be more agile, and really start to unlock the value of technology and the future technologies that will come online as well.
Brilliant. Lama, over to you, because I'm keen to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think Rashid and Tim covered most of it. I think speaking about being agile, being adaptable is definitely a big traits that we will look for when we reimagine ourselves, when we reimagine the business model. I would say in different social studies or those assessment skills or survey or tools we use, we always talk about trying to classify people between those that think, for example, the glass is half full or half empty. Today, probably there is a different group thinking about those that look at the glass that can be refillable. And I think this is the forward-looking, right? That you need those members on your team to be like, for you to be able to continue to embrace the change that you have. Today it's called COVID-19 pandemic, tomorrow it can be something else. So how do you continue have or equip your team with those type of traits and attributes, people who have those traits, and to be able really to survive? It's all about continue to play, be competitive, and able to deliver. And I think element around change management, Tim referred to that, looking at really the positive mindset, right? In terms of how you have a positive mindset to come and drive positivity across, whether if you are a people leader or if you are an employee or if you're leading this organization. And I think the third bucket I would like to also stress on is the engagement. Again, in an office space, we always talk about engaging talent, engaging people. Today, we're taking it to a different level about virtual engagement. And I think the more, looking at the last 3-4 months, the more we're able to engage with our employees, I think the better feel of where we are today and what are the different areas we need to look at for the future. And then I think that is really very important. We talk always about connectivity. So how do you maintain that element of virtual connectivity? And it does require certain skills across the board, not only at people leadership level, but across everyone. So I think it's, again, I'll go back to the point, it's really an opportunity. We've seen that people who at the personal level were not able to manage this crisis really had given a lot of impact on how they performed and how they deliver at the workspace. And that's another element of how do I differentiate myself as a professional, as a human being, as a professional to continue to deliver and really have an impact.
Really, no, that's very well said, Lama. And I think I want to throw something in there as well around people skills. I think one of the main things we're also seeing is that when at times, especially times when things are difficult and things are challenging and you're being thrown a curveball, one of the big things that differentiate and made a difference in many organizations is the organization's commitment to people practices, and these people are good people practices, and these good people practices are mainly driven by people managers. So for those on the call, for those that are obviously, hopefully watching the recording later, I would really encourage them to also, because the MBA is a brilliant program, it will teach you everything you need to know about a business. It's a little bit of everything. But I think something you need to invest in as well is your ability to manage people and lead people. And that doesn't have to be just in a line management point of view. It could also be across projects, leading them through different types of engagements across the business. And I think that is certainly going to be one of the key, it's always been that, but it's going to be one of the key things that people will look for and organizations will look for when they hire people. And that's a really good segue into actually our second part, which is more around how do we see the Middle East sort of reacting to a very important thing, which is flexible working. Like I said at the beginning of the session, it works. We can do it. It works. A lot of people are happier because of it. A lot of people are seem to have find a way to actually make that work-life balance work for them. Do you see us going back to just full-time 9-hour days, 5 days weeks, or do you expect us to kind of find somewhere in the middle? And can I ask, maybe I haven't heard from James in a while. Maybe James, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for this region, it was probably more of a shock than for some of the others, where home working and flexible working has been established for quite a while in sort of Europe and North America. I think probably because a lot of us live fairly close to where we work here, we don't have long commutes, so it wasn't as much of an issue. The demand wasn't there, or there was an element on the flip side that trust with the employees. What are they up to while they're not in the office? So it's that balance, I think. So I think the industries and companies here had to get used to that quite quickly when everyone started working from home. I think it links to some of the points that were made earlier around, it'll be driven both ways. I think there'll be an expectation from candidates now and employees. Well, you've seen it work, so I need that flexible working now. So don't you trust me? And that relationship and engagement with their employer in that mature environment. And actually, it could be linked to that EVP proposition as well that referred to earlier. How do we attract people in? Well, if you can offer flexible working in this environment, will that appeal to a different type of person? And then the business sort of perspective, as you mentioned, now that do we need to have these large offices that cost a lot of money to run, or actually we've seen the benefit of people, we trust our employees, we see how it works. Maybe we could reduce the size, maybe we get a hot desk in, rotating employees in and out of the building. And I think travel as well. I think travel, do we always have to travel to different countries in the GCC area to, go for meetings? I think, again, companies will have seen the cost savings of not having all of this business travel going on all around the world. Again, I think that will move to a more remote type working as well. But I think it's about businesses having the right policies and infrastructure set up in place to support and protect the employees at the same time, which some may sort of have been rushing to do recently.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think just kind of like that, it's that flip side of the coin, because now people can, or companies can be based anywhere, and they can choose to move their operations to different parts of the region or around the world. Similarly, people can then choose to work for other companies across. So even right now you're competing for talent that is based in Dubai or maybe in the GCC or in the Middle East, but all of a sudden your competition also could potentially be a company that's based out of Singapore that wants that talent pool. So I think that link to the EVP is really key. And for those who don't know what EVP is, it's the employee value proposition. So what is it that as an employer, what do we promise an employee if they come and work for us? What is it that we offer them as well? So not just in terms of benefits, but in terms of all the things that make up a relationship between an employee and employer come together. So I'm conscious of time, because I know it's really all interesting stuff, and I can talk about these things with you guys forever. But I'm conscious of time, and I want to see if maybe we could get 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and then what I'll do is we'll wrap up with just some kind of last thoughts from you. But maybe if I can just have a look at the questions to see. There's a lot of questions for Tim, and most of them seem to be centered around digital transformation, which is great. But I do feel like we don't want to focus too much on digital transformation, because that's not really the theme of the event, and we want to kind of focus more on kind of careers and things like that as well. So just looking quickly through some of those things. I have a question from Laura, which I think is a really interesting one, and please put your hand up if you want to answer that question. Her question is, how will change management play a role in adapting to the new normal? And that, I think, links back to the idea we're talking about in terms of skills, so the way we deal with change. Who has some thoughts, who wants to kind of take that one?
I don't mind taking this one.
There you go, Rashid.
So, okay, this hits home with us, especially when you are changing the way people do things. So a lot of our work is process improvement and digital transformation. So obviously, if you don't deploy good practices of change management, you will not succeed. So a part of change management for us is involving stakeholders and users from the beginning, getting their buy-in, using the carrot rather than the stick. I mean, even if you have a mandate, it doesn't mean that you should just use force. Otherwise, you will not get the same kind of adoption and positive reaction from the customers and community. So it's not sustainable to use force, and certainly involvement is one of the major roles. The other thing is factoring in their inputs and opinions and their suggestions, especially when you're dealing with customers who are experts in their field. Sometimes some entities, they presume to know better than the actual industry players. So it's wrong to have a top-down approach when it comes to introducing new procedures, new policies, new services. So having a bottom-up approach is very healthy. Obviously, I mean, we don't live in an ideal world, and sometimes you do need to use some measures of enforcement to get adoption. But I think it's healthy to always try with the carrot and the bottom-up approach. So it's the involvement, it's factoring in their inputs, it's a lot of hand-holding and lobbying, taking the time to explain things. Sometimes we get deluded in our own bubbles, and we assume people understand the benefits and the rationale behind what we're trying to do, but that's not always the case. So we put a lot of importance on change management, stakeholder management, user involvement, and hand-holding in any project that we deploy.
That's really good. I think.
Just probably add.
Go for it, Anna, please.
Yeah, I just probably would add to Rashid. I think it starts with the adoption of the change and really making the change as part of your operating rhythm, creating that trigger around change with the right tools, and then really covering that with the culture of lean. And I think this would be an element that would continue to look at change as a constant within the organization at all levels, whether at the working level or whether related to your processes, related to your culture. I think covering that with the lean culture is going to be important for you to continue to survive.
Absolutely. But that I was going to say something, but you said it way better than I could ever do that. So thank you for that, Lama. I have a question from Mohammed. It's an interesting one. So probably James, that might be something that you could pick up, because I think it's very much related to sales, I guess. And I'm going to paraphrase the question. So how does the leadership, especially the sales leadership in your organization, see the changes to the business and the deals funnel in light of the travel and social interaction restrictions, and therefore they minimize interaction with the client communities and meetings, events, and etc. And how do you approach that challenge? And that really links back to the idea of that, people used to come to showrooms to buy cars, and then you had to work around it because they couldn't do that anymore, and you still were able to do cars. So how do the sales directors and the people that are in that sales leadership approach that challenge?
It depends on which one you ask, but I think it's been a challenge for the sector as a whole, and a lot of these guys will have worked doing this similar type model for 15-20 years, but what I always say is that the industry is going through its biggest shift it's gone through in probably 40-50 years, with the move to electric vehicles, autonomous cars, connected cars. You've got disruptors in the market like Amazon, Google, Uber, Tesla, who are completely shaking up. Tesla were doing virtual showrooms and not using the dealership model from day one, I think. So, I think for a lot of the traditional manufacturers, it's around how do you avoid becoming the next blockbuster, with Netflix chasing you and dying, and actually, like it or lump it, you're going to have to change the approach. And I think whereas before, perhaps the customer experience digital teams were much smaller versus the traditional sales and dealer network development teams, I think we're going to see certainly see a big shift in that, just like we did in other sectors far earlier. In 2005, I was recruiting for the financial services sector, building their online customer experience teams. 20 years ago, we wouldn't have anticipated that we would do so much online around our personal banking and finances, which is obviously really important to us all. personally. So I think certainly over the next 5 years, the shift online will definitely move in the automotive sector. So I think it's linked back to the change management piece.
Great. Well, no, that really does cover it. And an example of that as well is digital banks. Now there's only digital only banks, so you wouldn't go to a branch, you don't even see a person. They come to you, they bring the forms to you, and all of that sort of thing. I think one of my favorite things during the pandemic is that I used to have to chase the bankers to go to, and they would be like, come to the branch to sign something. But during the pandemic, they just come to you, and look what, it was possible. So I don't know why they never did it before that. I mean, it's another question for you, James, but anyone else, feel free to comment on that. And it's, how do you think businesses work on improving their EVP in these challenging times in order to attract best talent, especially when the cost is under tremendous pressure? And that's probably like I've been working in the HR industry for about 12 years, and it's probably the $1 million question, and it's always being asked in every single event that I attend to. And it's, cost is always under pressure. I've never been at an event, I've never been through any time when people said, oh, cost is not a problem, let's just do everything we can. So in a way, how do, and Lama, you could also pitch into this, how can you as HR people improve that EVP without necessarily having to, pay packages that, hardship packages that we used to pay here in the region?
Yeah, so I think it largely depends on how we can sell internally, depending on what cost it is we're trying to, or what benefit, or what tool we're trying to implement that as part of our own local recruitment or HR strategies, is how do we internalize and communicate that internally to demonstrate the benefit. What's the payoff of doing this versus the cost outlay? You're absolutely right. In this current climate, every element of cost is being scrutinized, and the approval levels are all increased for most organizations out there at the moment. So, similarly at the moment, there's some tools, artificial intelligence tools that I would love to implement in the recruitment process here at Nissan. And the first question I got only yesterday was, James, you're going to have to demonstrate, are you going to reduce headcount, or how are you going to, if you're going to use this artificial intelligence tool? And for me, there's softer ways that we can demonstrate that, by delaying hiring. What's the cost of having that empty chair, of not having that salesperson in their role, in terms of the revenue that they would be potentially generating, and therefore can we demonstrate that's the cost saving because I've already got a lean team and I can't reduce headcount. It's not just as simple as that. So it's about being creative and clever internally, I think, with those business cases, with people who perhaps don't understand your area of expertise to demonstrate to get those positive outcomes.
Lama, is there something you want to add quickly to that? Please?
Yeah, I would probably add something around, obviously there is the element of compensation and pay and growth opportunities and career development, but I think the other element that I would like to mention is around the purpose. And going back to where I started in terms of, like, if I ask someone today, GE Gas Power, we're in a tough cycle, right, in the gas power generation business. A lot of competition around renewable, and that's the new reality we're facing today. If I today change my compensation strategies, relook at how I pay or how I compensate my salespeople, would I really be able to get into EVP? I don't think that's enough. I think it's all about what matters. How do I link the talent to the purpose of what I'm trying to do? And this is really the connecting point. So it feels like it's a different level of value prop, right? Or it's a different element, perspective of value prop. Do I really want to be part of that turnaround? Do I really be part of that creativity, trying something new, challenging myself, checking a new normal? And I think this is where we in GE Gas Power were trying to focus today, in terms of, okay, you want to be part of a turnaround. There is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of stuff that we don't know yet. We're going to figure it out with time. So being that vulnerable, able to take that risk and try is, for example, an important element, part of our EVP today.
Great, and that's again music to my ears. We do believe that in purpose. I think also purpose-led organizations tend to outperform their competitors by miles ahead. we always need to remember people don't just work for money, they work for meaningful work. And if they feel like they're doing meaningful work, contributing to something bigger than them. If anything, I think the pandemic has also shown us is that a lot of consumers as well hold businesses accountable to that. So if you're just another business that's focused on profit, you know, most likely your consumers are not going to feel loyal to you and will move on to the one that does. And I think it's the same thing with employees. If they don't feel like they're attached to a mission. If I could just throw a few things in there that are quite simple to do, or not simple, but they're quite, you know, easy to do without kind of thinking way too high level. I would say look at flexible working as a benefit, because flexible working doesn't actually cost you anything. If anything, it saves you money. The idea of adopting a flexible approach to working, and I'm not talking about flexible start times, because that's usually how it's promoted. We're talking about the idea of letting people choose how they deliver the work that you want them to deliver, and that could happen in many ways. If you go to the CIPD website, there are many resources there that talk about flexible working. They're all free and available free of charge to everyone to look at. The second thing, invest in their well-being. And again, COVID-19 showed us that employee well-being is going to be at the forefront of employee experience. If I work for an organization that doesn't care about me as a human, why should I work for them? So if they don't care about my well-being, and obviously we have many domains of well-being, so there's the physical, the emotional, the financial, the mental, and you need to invest in that. So, and again, the costs of investing in employee well-being will save you huge amounts of money in turnaround and insurance costs and so on. So do, I think, take the time to look into that. We have a few minutes left, and I want to kind of quickly wrap up, and I want to hear just closing thoughts from the panelists with just one thing, which is, what would be the one advice you would give to job seekers, candidates, you know, that are obviously hoping that they would graduate or they've already graduated and they want to move on to the job market? What one tip, one advice you would give them? And I'm going to start from Rashid, and then I will end with Lama.
Okay, that's a difficult one, Rami, but I mean, it's very hard to tell what will happen in the future and which industries will thrive and which ones will perish. They say hindsight is 20/20, you know, so looking back, it's always easy to analyze. But I would tell candidates, try as much as you can to look at the new areas where experimentation is happening, new industries. Look at the trends. Don't go to the traditional sectors doing traditional jobs, and avoid repetitive and mundane kind of roles because they will perish. So be very careful in the kind of roles you take and the kind of industries you cement yourself in. And it's fine to make a mistake, but that's where you have to be flexible. You have to adapt quickly. You have to challenge yourself and not be afraid to shift industries. I mean, I've been through many different industries in my career, and it's always been rewarding to make that shift. It can be scary sometimes because you feel more comfortable and the knowledge and experience you gain in one industry, but don't be afraid. So adapt to change, look to the new areas, and avoid the traditional kind of roles and industries. This is my...
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rashid. Moving on to Tim.
So I think building on what Rashid said, I think, you know, once you've found those sort of target organizations, target sectors, target industries that you want to focus on, work out what your elevator pitch is going to be. You know, a 30-second piece around how your passion is aligned to that company's vision, and how you are going to bring a certain level of skill set which is going to support an organization through a transformation.
Very good. Very, very, very brief, and I would echo that as well. An elevator pitch is something everyone should have and everyone should use, and it comes across not just obviously in face-to-face or in virtual, but also on your LinkedIn profiles, in your your CVs and all of that. If I could tell from just looking at your CV or your profile that who you are as a person, what you will bring, and what passion you bring into to my business, I will look at yours before I look at someone else who's just used a templated, objective summary as well. So very well said, Tim. Thank you so much for that. James, over to you.
Yeah, so I'll add two if that's okay. The first point is be authentic. So just moving on from your point there as well. So the interviewers want to see you. They want to see the real you. They don't want to see, obviously we all go in an interview are nervous and we sell ourselves, but I think it's got to be the right organization for you, and you've got to be the right person for that organization as well. So if you don't get the job, move on, don't lose any sleep over it, and maybe that was meant to be. And the other part, I think there was a question earlier about how do we find jobs and candidates, and I think it's just I would link that back to use your network. So I know as a recruiter that we can get 1,000 candidates for a job. Finding that needle in the haystack doesn't get easier in this climate for a recruiter. It actually gets harder because the haystack just gets bigger. So if you can network, reach out directly to the recruiter, build that relationship, and balance the need to appear keen versus the need to appear desperate. It's that balance. It's a bit like courting or dating. You just want to, show that you're keen, but it does not come across as too desperate either. Know your own worth. So we'll go back to that.
Brilliant. Very well said. All right, closing with Lama then.
Yes, I would just probably summarize in two things. I would advise all of you to, first of all, differentiate yourself and what you have to offer. And then second, find the right culture where the culture would allow you to continue with your offering.
Right, so that really brings it to a close. I want to thank everyone on the panel for their insights. There's loads that we talked about. We tried to cover a lot of things, I know, from recovery to recruitment to skills to talking about flexible working, and obviously ended up with some tips for everyone. So I hope everyone found that useful and enjoyed as much as I did. But other than that, thank you so much for tuning in. I know there's a remainder of the event for you, so I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions, and I will hand over back to Hiba from MBS.